The night was heavy with silence, but David's heart wasn't still. His enemies surrounded him like shadows ready to strike, fear clawing at his chest. Yet, in the middle of his panic, something shifted. A whisper rose in his soul, turning fear into a prayer that would shake the heavens. Welcome to Midnight Psalms, where we dive deep into the raw, unfiltered moments when hearts break, fears rise, and faith answers back. Here, we explore the nights when tears become worship, and every breath becomes a cry for God. David's hands trembled as the sound of footsteps grew closer. The air was cold, but his fear was colder still. His mind was racing, mapping every possible escape, yet every road seemed blocked. He had known danger before, but this time the weight of betrayal made it heavier, almost unbearable. His breath was shallow, his heart pounding against his ribs like a war drum, reminding him that life was hanging by a thread. Every shadow looked alive, every whisper of wind carried the echo of pursuit. Yet, somewhere deep inside, there was a faint flicker, a memory of the one who had never abandoned him in past battles. That memory was like a rope dangling over an abyss, and David knew he had to grab it before panic swallowed him whole. The king-to-be sank to his knees in the dirt, dust clinging to his hands as if trying to pull him down further. He could hear the rustle of armor in the distance, the metallic rhythm that told him he had only moments left. His throat tightened. He could taste fear like ash in his mouth. But the desperation became a strange fuel, pushing his voice upward instead of inward. The words didn't come polished or poetic, they came raw and jagged. Lord, help me. It wasn't the prayer of a king, it was the cry of a hunted man who knew he couldn't outrun the net closing around him. As he prayed, the noise of his pursuers grew, yet something strange began to happen inside him. His heartbeat slowed, just slightly, enough to let him breathe deeper. The prayer didn't change the danger, but it changed him. He remembered nights in the past when wolves circled his sheep, and how the same God who gave him strength then was the same God hearing him now. He realized that panic feeds on the lies of the moment, but prayer feeds on the truth of eternity. That truth started to feel louder than the clinking of enemy swords. The moonlight spilled across the hills, turning the ground silver. David lifted his eyes toward the night sky and saw the vastness above him. Stars spread like promises too numerous to count. The same God who hung those stars was listening to him right now. He whispered again, "You are my refuge, my fortress," not because he felt safe yet, but because speaking it made the walls of fear start to crack. His prayer was not a magic spell, it was a lifeline to the one whose presence could make a hunted man stand like a king even before the crown touched his head. Somewhere between fear and faith, David felt his breathing steady. His senses sharpened, not in paranoia but in clarity. He could hear the leaves rustle with the wind, smell the damp earth, feel the ground steady beneath his knees. Prayer had not erased his enemies, it had erased the hold they had on his soul. The battle outside still raged, but inside, he was no longer a prisoner of panic. That shift was invisible, but to David, it was everything. He remembered the songs he used to sing in the fields, melodies that rose from his heart when no one was listening but God. Without thinking, he began to hum one of them, and his voice grew until it was more than a hum, it was a declaration. The melody wrapped around him like armor, and the more he sang, the less power fear seemed to have. His song was a prayer in motion, a reminder that worship is not reserved for safe places but forged in the middle of danger. The footsteps were close now. David could see the flicker of torches weaving through the trees. The danger was undeniable, but so was his newfound peace. It was as if God had whispered to his soul, "They can chase your body, but they can't chain your spirit." The truth struck him. Panic is a thief, but prayer is a shield. He tightened his grip on his sling, not out of desperation, but out of readiness. Fear no longer dictated his actions. Faith did. David's mind wandered to the lion and the bear he had faced as a shepherd. Back then, no one would have bet on him surviving, yet he had. The same God who delivered him then was not absent now. He realized that faith doesn't mean you won't tremble, it means you choose to stand even while trembling. The prayer in his heart was still burning, and it gave him the courage to face whatever came out of the darkness. The torches drew nearer, their light slicing through the shadows like the edge of a blade. Yet David didn't run. He stepped out from behind the rock, his eyes locked on the advancing soldiers, not with the look of a cornered man, but of a man carried by something greater. His lips moved again, silently this time. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. The prayer was no longer a desperate cry, it had become a battle cry. And in that moment, the chase changed. Not because his enemies stopped, but because his spirit refused to be conquered. David understood now that prayer isn't always about God changing the situation instantly. Sometimes it's about God changing you in the middle of it. Panic had dragged him into the night, but prayer was leading him toward the dawn. And in the distance, beyond the sound of steel and shouts, he could almost hear the faint music of victory already playing. If you are enjoying this video, please like, subscribe and hit the notification bell to help this channel reach more people. Now let's continue. The night stretched on, but David no longer measured time by fear. Each second became an act of trust, each breath a quiet agreement with heaven. His enemies still advanced, their faces grim in the torchlight, yet he stood rooted in a strength that did not come from his own hands. Panic had wanted him to shrink, to hide, but prayer had made him rise. And in that rising, he sensed something bigger than survival. He sensed purpose. Maybe this night wasn't just about escape. Maybe it was about learning that faith shines brightest when shadows close in. A sudden gust of wind swept across the hillside, snuffing out 2 of the soldiers' torches. The darkness startled them, slowing their steps. David felt the shift, subtle but undeniable. It was as if God himself had reached into the scene, reminding David that he was not a distant observer but an active defender. The soldiers regrouped, but the pause gave David a surge of gratitude. Even the smallest interruptions in the enemy's march felt like divine fingerprints, signs that heaven was writing the ending to this chapter. David moved further into the open, no longer crouching in the shadows. Every step felt like defiance against the fear that had gripped him minutes ago. He thought of the psalms that would one day be sung by generations. Words born from nights just like this, when the world seemed against him, yet God's presence became his anchor. Perhaps this was how those songs began, not in comfort, but in chaos, not in peace, but in pursuit. And here he was, living the verses before they were ever written. The soldiers called out to one another, their voices low and tense. David could hear the uncertainty in their tone now. He realized something. The courage inside him was affecting the atmosphere around him. Just as fear is contagious, so is faith. His stillness in the face of danger wasn't human logic. It was spiritual resistance. And maybe, just maybe, his enemies were sensing that they weren't chasing an ordinary man anymore. They were chasing someone shielded by the unseen. David's prayer shifted again, no longer a plea for rescue but a conversation of trust. "You are my light and my salvation," he whispered into the night. The words tasted like freedom, even while danger still breathed in his direction. He realized that victory begins in the heart long before it happens in the flesh. And though the ground beneath him was still the same, it felt different, steadier, safer, as if each stone had been placed there to hold him up. Then came the moment of decision. David could run deeper into the wilderness or face his pursuers head-on. Prayer had given him clarity, and with it, a surprising calm. He knew which way to move, not because it was the easiest path, but because it was the one where God's presence felt closest. Fear had tried to push him into reckless flight. Faith now guided him into intentional steps. His legs moved, not from instinct, but from alignment with the voice he had learned to trust. The enemy closed in, their armor clinking like a drumbeat of doom. Yet before they could reach him, a sound broke through the night, the distant roar of water rushing in the ravine below. David saw it, a narrow crossing they would have to take, and he was already ahead of them. It wasn't his strength that had given him the lead, it was God's timing. Sometimes deliverance isn't a wall of fire or a sudden miracle. Sometimes it's simply being guided to the right place at the right moment. As he crossed the rocky pass, David turned one last time to see the glow of torches flickering behind him. His prayer arose again, this time without urgency, almost like a song, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies." It sounded strange even to his own ears, the idea of feasting while danger lurked, yet that was the paradox of faith. He was no longer defined by the chase, he was defined by the presence that walked with him. The further he moved from their reach, the more the night seemed to open. The stars felt closer, the air lighter. His panic was gone, replaced with a gratitude so deep it felt like worship. David knew this night would stay with him, not as a story of terror, but as the memory of when God taught him that prayer doesn't just calm you, it transforms you. He could almost hear the words forming into a psalm that would echo through ages. In my distress, I called to the Lord, and he answered me. And so, David kept walking into the darkness, not in fear, but in faith. The chase had not broken him, it had built him. Panic had been the opening scene, but prayer had rewritten the ending. If you've ever felt surrounded, if your heart has ever raced with the weight of unseen threats, remember this. The same God who heard David in the night hears you now. When fear comes, let it drive you to the one who turns panic into prayer and prayer into peace. And if this story stirred something in you, stay with us here at Midnight Psalms, where the nights are honest, the prayers are raw, and the hope is unshakable.